Hello, my good friends. What's up? I'm here filming two videos at once. I've given up on my hair. I mean, it's about to be a new year. Literally, I'm half hour away from the new year, and I've decided that I'm going to go into this new year with wild hair. And I am going to stop caring so much about how frizzy my hair is when it's this friggin' humid outside. Yes, it is like 70 degrees on New Year's Eve, or like 73, with about 80% humidity. And I'm done. My hair gave up, so my mind's gonna give up at the same time. And besides, I'm not really here to talk to you about my hair. I'm here to talk to you about books. Specifically, 5 books that were terrible. So, the fifth worst book I read this year was The Virgin's Lover by Philippa Gregory. I love Philippa Gregory, even though I have reservations about fictionalizing real people, especially in the way Gregory does in one of her books about a certain woman with the last name Boleyn. But this book, I had high hopes for. It was billed very much as a domestic thriller, and it was just a romance between Elizabeth and Dudley. Um, a pretty graphic one, too. And, you know, sex with the Queen of England is really not something I want to read about. Um, and the fact that I was just going in expecting a domestic thriller because it was billed as like, oh, they're in love, and they meaning Robert Dudley and Elizabeth, and then Robert Dudley's wife shows up dead. Well, Dudley's wife doesn't show up dead until like 3 pages before the end. So I don't know why it was advertised as like almost a murder mystery when it was just a romance, and not even a good romance. Um, so if you're trying to read all the way through the Plantagenet and Tudor series by Philippa Gregory, I'm not going to say skip this one, but just don't expect anything from it. And I actually had a really good reading year, so I gave this book 2 stars, and the fact that a 2-star book is on here, because I got really good at just DNFing books I didn't like. So if you're gonna read through all of the series, that's really the only way I would recommend this book. Is if you want to read the entire series, you're going to have to read this book. If you aren't necessarily interested in reading the entire series, then you can skip this one. It's really not a very good portrayal of Elizabeth because she's very, very flat in this. She doesn't really. It's like she's like one of her statues. She just has not much personality. Yes, the Elizabeth films are very, very historically inaccurate also, but at least Elizabeth feels human in that one and not like an old, lifeless statue. All right, moving on. Number 4, Legends of the Guard. I think volume 1. This is a Mouse Guard book. I'm gonna talk about comics in a separate video, but because I DNF'd so many books this year, most of the books I read were good. This one wasn't. It was essentially fan fiction, but like framed as legends coming from each mouse in the Guard. They're like at a hotel or an inn, and they're eating and having dinner with each other, and they're each telling stories, and the stories are like fan fiction, art, and everything. And if I want to read fan fiction, I'll go to whatever it is, fanfiction.net. Yeah. Okay, so number 3, A Case for Easter by Lee Strobel. So you can see my review for A Case for Easter. I'm pretty sure it's going to be right there, but I'll do this just in case, but I'm pretty sure it's here. I did a reading blog of it. As an investigative journalist, I think Lee Strobel needs to take a serious step back, do some critical thinking, and ask himself if he is still worthy of calling himself an investigative journalist after that. Because that book just totally, the way it presents its case is it has the presupposition that everything in the Bible is already true, instead of going back and looking to see, hey, these events that, Lee Strobel cites, did they really happen? We can't just take the Bible's word for it. If we're going to investigate, we have to investigate the Bible. And he doesn't. He investigates the claims the Bible makes. Okay, is it possible Jesus was sweating blood? Could Jesus possibly have survived the crucifixion? That all aside, he does, come up with a good case that, okay, yeah, Jesus could have been sweating blood, but how do we know any of this actually happened? I don't think anybody's questioning when it comes to questioning faiths as far as Christianity as to if the things in the Bible happened, how would they have happened? We more so question, did they happen? Did the Bible happen? Is there an all-powerful, omnipotent God that you claim there is? And prove it. That's all the skeptics want. And so far, no one, including Mr. Strobel, the investigative journalist himself, has been able to answer. Moving on. Number 2. The second worst book I read this year was Towers Falling. Now, I had really, really high hopes for this one because it deals with a heavy subject like 9/11. And it's a middle grade book, and my students all read on a middle grade level, even though they're in 10th grade. The problem with this one was just the style. It was weird. It looked weird on the page. There were random white space everywhere, and I just really didn't connect with the style. I thought opening up that book and looking at it, it looked weird. I don't know what the white space was there for. I don't know why the chapters were separated the way they were, and it made it really hard to connect with the story when things just looked so strange in front of me. So, that brings me to the worst book I read this year, Rebel's Creed by Daniel Green. I have so many questions about that book. I hear it's a book and a half, or 2 novellas and then the start of a second book, and evidently one of the characters is autistic. I wasn't getting lots of autism from this person. Why are all the characters bisexual? Is that the default in this world? I don't know. So, Rebel's Creed was a very trippy reading experience for me. I sort of enjoyed it. I don't know why the font was so big. The way I'm reacting to it now is still kind of what the heck is this? So, I don't know why I read it. I don't know why it was published. I don't know what the heck it is. So, that's kind of why it's the worst, because I read it and I was like, what was this kind of thing? I can't even really talk about, style or structure or characters because it was just so all over the place that there was no through line through it. There was no real plot. It was just this one story, which is just Briefs of Peace told from Chapman's point of view. Evidently Chapman's autistic. I don't know, I wasn't getting that. And then there's an interlude where the main character from Breach of Peace is turning into a monster, and then there's Holden, who I guess is the adopted son of the main character from Breach of Peace, and he's bisexual, his girlfriend's bisexual, everyone's bisexual, and I just, is that the norm? Or did they have to face prejudice, or is everyone in this world just, fun-loving bisexual? I don't know. I was so confused. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just if you're gonna make human sexuality, sexual identity is such a huge part, we need to know what the norm is in the world. So if we're reading about America in, 1754, obviously, bisexuality is not going to be the norm. But in this world Daniel Green created, maybe it is. I don't know. I'm all over the place because the book was all over the place. I don't even know where to start with it. Like, it was so weird. And so those are the ones I could really talk about being the 5 worst. Technically, the worst book I read this year that I least enjoyed was actually called Prelude to Insurrection. I think it's kind of my fault. I'll link the video where I talk about it up there. It's a prequel to a self-published series, and I think I probably just should have read the series first. So that's kind of on me, so that's not even worth talking about, which is why I didn't include it in the 5. But I definitely had a terrible experience this year with an author. His name is Zach Argyle. I read 2 of his books. I read Voice of War and Stones of Light. I posted kind of a video right here or right here somewhere, just kind of making fun of it and giving him a grammar lesson, but this is not a laughing matter. When authors enter reviewer spaces and insult reviewers on Twitter, it's not funny. And I'm not a fast reader, and so the first 2 Threadlight books took me about 16 hours to read. I could have done so much with that 16 hours. I could have done work. I could have read all of Wolf Hall. I could have, watched the entire miniseries of Wolf Hall twice in those 16 hours. And when authors, especially self-published authors, you guys know I have feelings about self-publishing, and I was really hoping you'd be wrong about these 2 books, because Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads actually said in a collab video he did with someone that Voice of War is better than any self-published book has the right to be. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. Gave it a chance, read Voice of War, full of amateurish errors, but it was enjoyable. Read Stones of Light. The errors were worse. The characters hadn't changed. I gave it 2 stars. And in my notes, I mentioned something about, not starting sentences with improper gerundic phrases. And that my review was liked on Goodreads by Zach Argyle, and then he tweeted about it the next day. And he said in his tweet, he was like, I've been informed by a reviewer that Stones of Light is bad because I started sentences with gerunds. And so he got on there. Someone was like, WTF is a gerund. He's like, I think it's a technical term said by people to make themselves feel smart. And he was just really rude and condescending and butthurt over it. The fact that I gave his book 2 stars. And this is the crap that just really irks me when it comes to self-publishing. And it was mean. I didn't like it. And to have taken all the crap I have about saying stuff about self-publishing, I don't think it's a good way to debut. I don't like the stuff it allows for. I think if you want that kind of control, you need to go with an indie press. I don't think it's really much different than writing a blog, because all you have to do is go online and hit publish. And obviously I know that writers work so hard on it, which is why I'm like, don't go that route. Go with an indie press if you want control. Because if you self-publish, you're always going to be amongst people like this. And it's just not a good way to debut. It's not a good way to get your writing out of there. Your writing is sacred, and you worked so hard on it. Just treat it with respect, and then treat your readers with respect. It's not so much a money thing for me. It's the fact that I am a busy woman, and I basically just threw 16 hours down the tube, and you go on there on Twitter, and he's just in an echo chamber with all his fans, being like, oh, this reviewer is and whining. And Obviously, he didn't know who I was when he did that, because I've encountered him in Discords, encountered him on Twitter, Goodreads, blah, blah, blah. And he DM'd me, and it's probably the worst experience I've ever had in my life in regards to the writing profession. I'm not going to read the third Threadlight book. I'm not going to encourage anybody to read Threadlight. Just don't support this guy. He's mean. So anyway, I will do my 10 best books right now. So guys, keep reading, keep writing, keep loving words, and I'll see you next time. Bye.